So the Vancouver Canucks are picking 7th overall, and if you look at a lot of the scouting reports, draft rankings, and mock drafts, it seems like every source has the Canucks picking Noah Dobson at 7th. Noah Dobson being the defenseman over there from the Acadie-Bathurst Titan from the QMJHL. He's like Evan Bouchard in a way. A lot of people think he's really good and deserves to be a top talent in the draft this year, and there's a lot of people who think that he probably deserves to drop down to 10 and beyond. But there's a lot of mock drafts everywhere saying that the Canucks are taking Dobson. So let's take a little bit of a look at this issue. Not necessarily Dobson, this isn't really a talk about Dobson, but this is a talk about who exactly I think the Canucks should draft, and whether or not Noah Dobson would be a player we should draft. Now, first things first, getting things right off the bat, if we drafted Dobson, regardless on anything else, I think that there would be at least one other player that I would have wanted instead. Because we're picking 7th, right? And from my personal list of players that we could take, the players that I would like the Canucks to get include 1. Dahlin, 2. Svechnikov, 3. Zadina, 4. Boqvist, 5. Hughes, 6. Wahlstrom, and 7. Tkachuk. That's 7 players right there. And if we're drafting at 7th overall, that means that one of these 7 players will be available when we draft. Any one of these guys, whether that be Wahlstrom, Hughes, or Boqvist, I want one of these guys. I didn't want to take Bouchard because of the issues I laid out in my concerns with Evan Bouchard video. But the way I saw it was the fact that we're picking 7th overall was a great thing, because there were 7 players that I would have wanted the Canucks to take, and if we're picking at 7th, that mathematically means that one of them would still be on the board. And Benning said himself, they want to go with the best player available. Okay, so what is it with the fact that everybody thinks we're drafting Dobson? Well, it's the idea that the Vancouver Canucks need defense, and I understand that that is the absolute case. I made an entire video about that. We need defense. If we're in a position to draft 7th overall, there will be defenders who will be available in this spot. Noah Dobson in particular is a guy who doesn't really do anything wrong. He knows how to do all of it. Playing for the Titan this year in the QMJHL, 69 points in 67 games played with the A on his sweater. The only real concern about Dobson's game is his physicality. He's 6'3", so he's pretty big, but he's at 180 pounds, which means that he does get shoved off of the puck a little bit. And some scouts in particular have talked about how his game is easily movable, how he's the kind of player who's easy to shove off the puck. And this is obviously a concern as a defenseman, but his two-way game, his offensive IQ, defensive IQ, his smarts, his positioning, his puck skills, these are all really good assets about his game. He's not really flashy, and he's not really the guy who makes you go, oh my god, he's so good. Look at him, he's amazing. He's just the guy who quietly does everything right. He's a boring player, in the best sense of the word. He's boring in that he doesn't do anything to stand out, but he does everything right. And you will rarely find Noah Dobson making mistakes. And this is why he's such a solid defenseman playing in the QMJHL. And I can acknowledge that. I can acknowledge that he's a good player who's able to do the right things almost all the time. But I don't know if this is the player the Canucks need at 7th overall. Because if we're taking a player at 7th, then that means that any one of the 7 players I mentioned earlier would be available, and I believe that each one of these guys has that X factor. I believe that if we're going with the best player available, the best player that we will pick at 7th will be the guy who's not selected out of those 7 players that I listed earlier. Most likely, the guys dropping down to 7th would be Boqvist, Hughes, or Wahlstrom, and I'd rather take any one of these guys over Dobson, even Wahlstrom, because I feel that if Wahlstrom is the player who he's projected to be, he will be a game changer in a much stronger way than Noah Dobson could ever be. And this is why I don't know if I'd necessarily want to take Dobson with the 7th overall pick. I like Dobson. I think he's a solid player. I like him more than Bouchard, mind you. But I wouldn't take him at 7. That makes sense, right? Am I putting up a good argument for what I believe in here? Because I see no problems in Dobson's game, but I just think that any one of these other players would be better. I want a Hughes because he's an offensive dynamo who can spark things up anywhere on the ice and who's a lightning bolt of a player. I like Boqvist because he's an offensive phenomenon. He can do whatever he wants with the puck. His shot is incredible. I like Wahlstrom because his USHL seasons are on the levels of Eichel and Matthews, better than Besser and Kyle Connor, not to mention other guys like Tolvanen. So, tell me why Dobson is a better player to pick at 7th when one of these guys would be available instead. I'd be willing to hear it, but just from my point of view, if we're taking the best player available, I want one of the 7. I wouldn't take Dobson at 7. And I understand the need for defense. I understand that if it comes down to a Wahlstrom versus Dobson situation, if you look at the definition of these players and the team's needs, it would be a better pick to pick Dobson, but I want to go with the best player available. We need defense, yes, that is for sure. We need to draft defense because there's a lot of good defenders in this draft. But it's not even limited to the first round. We could still get good defensemen in the second round and so on, but I totally understand the need for drafting defense in the first because 7th overall is a high pick, and we have a lot of opportunities to grab any kind of defenseman that we want picking at 7th. But that doesn't mean that if Wahlstrom or Tkachuk are available at this situation, I want to pass on them. It doesn't mean that. Because, honestly, the Vancouver Canucks need to get more firsts anyway. We can trade Tanev or something. Trades. Make trades with the Islanders so we can grab one of their 2 first-round picks. Make trades with playoff teams so that they can go deeper in the playoffs next year and we can grab more players in the first round, whether that be Dominic Bach, Kotkaniemi, or Grigory Denisenko, or Jet Wu, or Addison. We can draft so many players at this spot, but up at 7th overall, I don't think it's a hard decision to make. I don't want to take Dobson with the 7th overall pick. If we took Dobson at 7, of course, I can't do anything about it, but I think there would be at least one player that would be better than him at that range. Which is why I'm so confused, man. Like, all the mock drafts have us taking Dobson, and then guys like Boqvist are going in, like, the 11, 12 range. Hughes is going at 9. And I'm just thinking to myself, if we pass on Hughes and Boqvist, my goodness. I'm sorry, Dobson. You're a good player, and I understand your value. I like you more than Bouchard, but I would not take you over Boqvist or Hughes. Of course, cue the parade if the Vancouver Canucks do end up taking Dobson and Hughes and Boqvist each slide down to the Islanders. I'll mark my words and I'll say, okay, we got Dobson, I hope he becomes the best player for us going forward. But at this point before the draft, I just don't want it to happen like that. I don't see this being the best decision. By the way, imagine if that does happen. The Islanders do get Boqvist and Hughes. My goodness, their entire defensive core would change on a whim. Tavares coming back. You got amazing power play of Tavares, Barzal, Lee, and then on the defensive end you got Boqvist and Hughes. Oh, that would be crazy. But I just hope that Boqvist and Hughes, at least one of them become Vancouver Canucks. If not, Wahlstrom. I'd like that a lot more. And I think that that would be the best decision out there. So, Noah Dobson, I hope he has a great career. Whether that be with Vancouver or Chicago or Edmonton, whatever team decides to take him, I hope he has a great career. But I don't think it would be the best decision to take him 7th. If we traded down, if we traded into the mid-first round, if we traded our other assets to grab a second first, that would be ideal. We get ourselves a Wahlstrom at 7 and a mid-round defenseman. That'd be great. And I totally trust that Jim Benning and his scouting knows who the best players available would be at the range that we're drafting at. And, albeit, the first round entirely. But Benning said himself, "We gotta take the best player available at 7. I understand that we need defense, but if Wahlstrom is there, he is the best player available, and I would like to take him. But that doesn't mean I want Dobson at 7th. Hope you guys enjoyed. This is your Plus Gaming, and bye.